"Please, don't beat me. I'm already broken," said the native woman. What he did next stunned her. She had learned over many years to move quietly through the world. Not because she wanted to hide, but because the world had taught her that loudness, protest, or even too much presence could bring trouble. Her name was Anahita, and she was a native woman whose life had been shaped by hardship and loss. She had grown up in a small, remote village surrounded by forests and rivers, yet life had not been gentle with her. The village itself had been a place of resilience, where families helped each other survive through harsh winters, meager crops, and uncertain days. Yet even in that close-knit community, Anahita had faced challenges that left her careful and wary. From a young age she learned to read people, to notice small changes in their expressions, the tone of their voice, the way their hands moved. These observations became a form of protection. When she was 10, she had seen her older cousin scolded harshly for speaking out of turn. When she was 12, she had watched a neighbor punished for taking too much from a shared garden. Every lesson etched itself into her mind. Sometimes silence was safety, and sometimes survival required more than courage. It required patience. By the time she was 17, Anahita carried herself with a quiet strength. She worked long hours, helping her family gather food, repair their home, and care for younger siblings. Her hands were calloused, her back tired, yet she carried a sense of pride in the knowledge that she was keeping her family alive. At the same time, she felt a weight on her heart. She had witnessed the unfairness of the world early, and it had left marks on her spirit. Life, she had learned, could be cruel not just in accidents or natural disasters, but through the choices of people, the ones who had power, authority, or influence over others. On that particular day, Anahita found herself standing in the presence of a man she had been warned about all her life. He was someone who carried authority in their small town, someone who had the ability to make decisions that could affect her and those she cared about. People around her often spoke of him in whispers. His presence alone was enough to make others nervous. Anahita had seen how he interacted with people before. Curt words, sharp gestures, and a confidence that bordered on intimidation. She had never crossed him directly, yet she had always been careful, observing from the sidelines, learning the rhythm of his moods, and understanding when to speak and when to remain silent. The moment she faced him, a familiar fear crept into her chest. It was not an overwhelming panic, but a subtle tightening, a cautious alertness that made her senses sharper. Her instincts told her that this encounter could be difficult, and she braced herself accordingly. She spoke softly, almost whispering, as if the gentleness of her words could protect her. "Please don't harm me," she said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of her life's experiences, the lessons learned in quiet observation, the scars of moments when she had been powerless, and the deep desire to survive without conflict. As she spoke, she noticed the man pause. That pause was unusual. People who relied on fear rarely hesitated. They acted quickly, decisively, and expected compliance. Yet here he was, listening. For a moment, Anahita felt a strange sense of disbelief. Could someone actually stop and consider another person's words? Was it possible that her appeal to his humanity might be heard? She held her breath, not out of hope, but out of caution, aware that any sudden movement, any perceived threat, could shift the moment back into danger. During that brief pause, Anahita's mind wandered to the many times she had faced challenges in her life. She remembered the long winter evenings spent by the fire with her grandmother, who had taught her the importance of resilience. "Strength isn't always about fighting," her grandmother had said. "Sometimes strength is knowing when to bend without breaking, when to step carefully so you don't fall." Those words had become a guiding principle in Anahita's life. She understood that courage wasn't always loud. It was often quiet, thoughtful, and deliberate. Her thoughts also went to her younger siblings. She thought of the little boy who adored her stories, the little girl who mimicked her every movement. She thought of her parents who had worked tirelessly to provide what little they could. All of them depended on her, not just for physical support, but for emotional guidance. She knew that showing fear might embolden some people, but showing too much defiance could bring harm. She had learned to find a delicate balance between caution and assertiveness. The man continued to study her, and Anahita could feel the tension in the air. It was not just the fear of what might happen, but also the awareness that this encounter was pivotal. In her heart she knew that nothing in her life had prepared her for what could come next. She felt every heartbeat, every small intake of breath, as if the universe had narrowed to this single moment, and yet she also felt a strange sense of clarity. Despite the fear, she was aware of her own strength, the inner resilience that had carried her through countless hardships. As the seconds stretched, Anahita realized that she had a choice. She could shrink further, allow herself to be invisible, or she could stand with the quiet dignity she had cultivated over years of struggle. She chose the latter. Her voice remained soft, but there was a firmness in it now. She did not plead anymore. She spoke her truth. "I am already broken," she said, not in despair, but as a statement of fact. "I have survived hardships, and I am asking for peace, not conflict." The man's eyes lingered on her. There was something in the way he looked at her, a flicker of surprise, perhaps even hesitation. People rarely admitted vulnerability, and fewer still admitted that they had been worn down by life's difficulties. Anahita's words had done something unusual. They disrupted the expected script. She had not shouted, threatened, or demanded. She had simply spoken honestly, and that honesty was disarming. For Anahita, this moment was a testament to the lessons she had learned over years of quiet observation. She had understood, deep within her, that people could change, even if only for an instant. She had learned that the world's harshness did not define her responses. It was her choices, her actions, and her words that shaped the immediate reality around her. And in that choice, she found a small but profound power. The power to influence another human being not through fear, but through courage, dignity, and honesty. As the encounter continued, she noticed subtle changes in the man's posture. He no longer seemed as rigid or as commanding. Perhaps he was reconsidering, reflecting, or simply taking in the unexpected calm she projected. For Anahita, it was enough to notice that the balance had shifted slightly, that the moment was no longer as threatening as she had feared. She held herself steady, aware that the next steps, whatever they might be, would be shaped by the energy she maintained in her presence. Even though the outcome of the encounter was still uncertain, Anahita felt a sense of accomplishment, not because she had achieved anything monumental, but because she had asserted herself in a way that was consistent with her values. She had maintained her integrity, spoken her truth, and acted with thoughtfulness and care, and that, she realized, was sometimes the bravest act of all. In the end, Anahita walked away from that moment carrying her lessons forward. She had not changed the man entirely, nor had she eliminated the challenges in her life. But she had reinforced her own strength and resilience, and she had reminded herself that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, she could influence the world around her through courage, honesty, and quiet determination. This was not the end of her journey, but it was a pivotal beginning, a moment that reminded her that survival and dignity could coexist, even in difficult circumstances. He had always been a man who expected obedience, who believed that the world responded to authority. From the moment he could walk, he had been taught that power was earned through fear, that people followed those who were firm and unyielding. His father had been a strict man, and his childhood was filled with lessons about control and respect, lessons that often crossed the line into harshness. Growing up, he had learned quickly that to question authority was to invite trouble. He carried these lessons into adulthood, shaping his personality and the way he interacted with others. People in the town often whispered about him. Some said he was capable of kindness, though they rarely saw it. Most saw only the strict, demanding side, the side that made others uneasy. Yet beneath that exterior was a complexity few understood. He had memories, deep and hidden, of times when he felt powerless. He remembered moments from his childhood when he had wanted to speak up but had been silenced. Moments when he had wanted comfort, but had been met with coldness. These memories were buried under years of habit and expectation, but they were there, quietly shaping who he was. When he first heard the words of the young woman standing before him, he was taken aback. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, yet it carried a clear honesty that he could not ignore. "Please, don't harm me," she had said. Simple words, yet they struck a chord deep within him. He had expected fear, tears, or even defiance. Instead, she had shown a quiet strength, a willingness to speak truth, even in the face of uncertainty. It unsettled him, because he had never experienced someone approaching him in this way. For the first time in years, he hesitated. It was a brief moment, barely noticeable, yet it held weight. He found himself reflecting on memories he had long pushed away, the times he had been young and afraid, the times he had wanted protection rather than punishment. He remembered his mother, her soft voice and her gentle hands, the way she had tried to teach him about compassion when the world around him had taught him about fear. Those recollections surfaced unexpectedly, mingling with the present, and for a moment he felt the unfamiliar stirrings of doubt. He observed the woman carefully. There was no arrogance in her posture, no attempt to manipulate or impress him. She did not try to challenge his authority outright, but she also did not shrink entirely. She existed in the space before him honestly, without pretense. That honesty was rare, and it made him uncomfortable. He had spent so much of his life relying on appearances, on the assumptions people made about him, on the way others feared him. To be confronted by someone who saw him as a human being rather than a figure of power was disorienting.
As he studied her, he noticed her eyes, steady, calm, and unflinching.
They did not waver, even as she spoke words that revealed vulnerability. There was courage there, the courage of someone who had endured hardship and had learned to navigate life carefully. It was not the loud, reckless bravery he had sometimes encountered, but a measured, deliberate strength that came from experience. He realized with a sense of astonishment that her words were not just a plea. They were a statement of her existence, her resilience, and her awareness of her own worth. He could feel a change inside him, subtle but undeniable. His hand, which had instinctively risen in anticipation of control, remained still. For the first time in a long while, he questioned what he was about to do. He thought about the countless moments when he had followed habit, when he had acted without reflection. He realized that actions taken out of fear or routine often caused more harm than good. And now, facing someone who had the courage to speak without threat or manipulation, he felt the weight of his choices more acutely than ever before. Memories of his past, long suppressed, continued to surface. He remembered times when he had wished for someone to show him patience rather than anger, understanding rather than judgment. He recalled moments of quiet kindness that had been rare in his upbringing, moments that had left an impression despite their brevity. Those memories began to influence his thoughts, creating a tension between the man he had become and the man he might still be. For a moment, he allowed himself to wonder if change was possible, not for the world, not for the people around him, but for himself. The woman's presence was grounding. She did not demand attention, nor did she shy away. She simply existed, and in her existence she reflected a truth he had long avoided: that every human being, no matter how seemingly small or powerless, had the capacity to affect others profoundly. Her words were gentle, but they carried weight. "I am already broken," she had said. That statement lingered in his mind, not as a complaint, but as a reflection of life's realities. He thought about his own moments of brokenness, the times he had felt vulnerable and unseen, and he realized that recognition of vulnerability was not weakness. It was human. As the moments stretched, he became aware of the choices before him. He could act out of habit, maintaining the rigid persona he had cultivated for so long. Or he could pause, reflect, and consider a response that broke the expected pattern. That possibility was unfamiliar, even frightening. To step outside of routine, to act differently than he had always acted, required courage, a different kind of courage than he had known. Yet something inside him urged him to explore that possibility, to allow the moment to unfold in a way that honored both their humanity. He began to see the woman not just as someone under his authority, but as a person with her own history, her own experiences, and her own resilience. In her eyes he saw a reflection of strength tempered by hardship, a clarity of spirit that demanded recognition. For the first time he felt that power did not have to be exercised through fear or control. He realized that true influence came from understanding, empathy, and the ability to pause before reacting. It was a revelation that unsettled him deeply, but also offered a glimmer of hope, a possibility that the man he had been could evolve into someone different, even if only slightly. Time seemed to slow as he continued to process these thoughts. The room felt charged with quiet tension, a tension not born of threat, but of mutual awareness. He noticed small details about her posture, the way her hands rested calmly, the subtle firmness in her gaze. Every detail reinforced the sense that she was not merely a passive presence, but an active force in the room. She had claimed her space without demanding it, and in doing so she had shifted the dynamic entirely. He reflected on the lessons of his life once more. He had been taught that fear ensured obedience, that power demanded compliance, that weakness deserved exploitation. Yet here was a living contradiction, a demonstration that strength could manifest quietly, without aggression or defiance. He began to understand that the world he had known, the world of control and fear, was not the only possible reality. There were other ways to interact, other ways to relate, other ways to exercise influence without causing harm. In that moment he felt something unfamiliar but profound: accountability. Not accountability imposed by others, but a personal recognition that his actions mattered, that the choices he made, even in small moments, could have lasting impact. And for the first time in a long time he felt a measure of responsibility, not as a burden, but as an opportunity to respond differently, to choose restraint over reflex, understanding over control. The woman remained calm, observing him without expectation. Her patience, her composure, and her quiet strength created a space in which he could reflect honestly. She did not demand change. She simply existed as a mirror reflecting the possibility of a different path. He realized that her courage was not about confrontation, but about presence, and that presence had the power to influence, even someone as hardened as he was. As the encounter drew to a close, he felt a shift within himself that he could not yet fully articulate. He had not acted impulsively, he had not followed the patterns of the past, and he had allowed a pause, a reflection, and a reconsideration. That small act of restraint felt revolutionary to him, a quiet affirmation that change was possible, even if gradual. He left the moment with a lingering awareness that his life, his choices, and his understanding of power could be different, and perhaps better, than they had been before. Time seemed to stretch in a way that made every heartbeat louder than usual. The moment between them was delicate, almost fragile, like glass waiting to be touched. The man who had always relied on certainty, control, and the familiar rhythm of authority now faced an unfamiliar space, a space where no one was trying to obey or challenge him, where no fear could dictate the interaction. Anahida's presence, calm and unwavering, had created a pause in the usual flow of life, a moment where reflection was unavoidable. He shifted slightly, as if to measure the impact of her words and presence. The phrase she had spoken earlier, "I am already broken," lingered in his mind. It was not a complaint, nor an accusation, but a statement of fact, spoken with quiet dignity. It carried the weight of someone who had endured hardship, and yet had not given up entirely. It was a reflection of human resilience, the kind that is earned through countless small acts of survival and courage. He found himself considering what those words meant, not just for her, but for himself. He remembered the many people he had encountered in his life, those he had judged or dismissed, often without knowing their full stories. How many times had he reacted quickly, assumed the worst, or used his authority to assert dominance without understanding? How many moments had he missed because he failed to pause and truly listen? Now, faced with Anahida's calm presence, he realized that reflection could be more powerful than action, that restraint could have more impact than force. Anahida, sensing the pause, did not speak. She allowed him the space to reflect, to confront the tension that had been building for years within him. She had learned that sometimes silence could communicate more than words. Her own life had been shaped by observation, by listening carefully, by understanding the motivations and limitations of those around her. And now she saw that the man was not simply a figure of authority or fear, but a human being grappling with his own internal conflicts. For him, the sensation was disorienting, but revealing. He had always defined himself by the strength of his control, yet he now felt an unfamiliar vulnerability. He realized that power could be exercised in ways that were not rooted in fear. He could choose patience over impatience, understanding over judgment, and reflection over immediate reaction. The realization was not easy, nor was it sudden. It unfolded gradually, like a light breaking through a fog. He thought about the lessons of his childhood and youth. He remembered times when he had wished someone would simply listen, moments when he had wanted guidance rather than punishment. And he remembered how rare those moments had been. Life had taught him to act decisively, to protect himself by maintaining authority, and to assume the worst about others until proven otherwise. But now, confronted by Anahita's honesty, he recognized that life had offered another lesson, that kindness and restraint could be revolutionary, even in small moments. Anahita, meanwhile, felt a cautious sense of hope. She had faced many challenges in her life, many situations where her voice seemed too small to matter, too weak to change outcomes. And yet in this room, she realized that her calm presence and honest words had shifted something fundamental. She had not demanded respect, nor had she attempted to manipulate him. She had simply spoken her truth and allowed him the space to make a choice. And in that choice, she saw a glimpse of what could be possible. The man's thoughts wandered further, deeper into self-reflection. He considered how he had interacted with people in the past, how his actions might have left invisible marks on their lives. He thought of colleagues, neighbors, and friends, anyone who had experienced his authority, his judgments, or his impatience. How many of them had he unintentionally hurt? How many times had he acted without considering the human being on the other side of the interaction?
The awareness was uncomfortable, but it was also grounding.
He realized that he had the opportunity to respond differently this time. There was no external pressure forcing him to act in the familiar way. There was only the choice before him. And the choice was simple in its appearance, yet profound in its consequences. He could act as he always had, following habit and expectation. Or he could step outside of the pattern and consider a response rooted in understanding. The simplicity of the choice belied its difficulty. Anahita's eyes met his, steady and unflinching. She did not ask for forgiveness, nor did she seek to teach him a lesson. She simply existed in a space of quiet truth. That presence, more than any words, held the power to influence him. She reminded him that human interactions were not just about authority and submission, control and compliance. They were about recognition, respect, and empathy. And in that recognition he began to see the possibilities for change. He noticed the small details of her posture, the way she held her head high without arrogance, the calm steadiness in her breathing, the gentle but firm way she stood in her own space. Every detail communicated a quiet strength that demanded acknowledgement. For the first time, he felt that power did not have to be about intimidation. True influence, he realized, could come from presence, calmness, and understanding. The pause between them extended, but it was no longer tense in the way he had expected. It was contemplative, almost meditative. He felt a shift in the air, a subtle acknowledgement of mutual humanity. In that pause, he recognized the possibility that one moment could break a cycle, that a single act of restraint could change the trajectory of an encounter. And though he could not fully predict the outcome, he understood that choosing compassion over habit was a step toward something better for both of them. Anahita remained calm, maintaining the same quiet strength she had shown from the beginning. She did not anticipate a specific reaction, nor did she expect the man to respond in a particular way. Her patience was not passive. It was intentional, a reflection of the resilience she had cultivated throughout her life. She had learned that human behavior often unfolds slowly, that change is rarely instantaneous. And now she saw that the man was beginning to confront that very truth for himself. He found himself thinking not about rules, authority, or expectation, but about human connection. He considered the weight of words, the power of restraint, and the subtle influence of presence. He realized that in countless encounters he had overlooked these factors, focusing instead on control and compliance. And yet, in this single moment, he glimpsed a different way of being, one that honored both himself and the humanity of others. The realization was quiet, but profound. He felt a sense of responsibility, not as an obligation, but as an opportunity to act with intention. He understood that actions taken without reflection could cause harm, but actions taken with awareness and care could create understanding. And for the first time he felt the potential for meaningful change, not in the world at large, but in the very simple, immediate way he interacted with another person. Anahita's words, her calmness, and her steady presence had opened a door. It was not dramatic or sudden, but subtle, a shift in perception that had far-reaching implications. She had demonstrated that strength could exist without force, that courage could manifest without confrontation, and that influence could be exercised without domination. And in demonstrating this, she had provided him with a mirror, an opportunity to reflect on his own life, choices, and potential for growth. He realized that this encounter would remain with him long after it ended. It was not about her, nor solely about him. It was about the possibilities created when people chose to act thoughtfully, when they allowed space for reflection, and when they recognized the humanity in one another. He felt a sense of quiet gratitude, not toward her as a savior, but toward her as a teacher of a subtle, powerful lesson, that one person's calm presence could influence another in ways that force and fear never could. The moment slowly drew to a close, but its impact lingered. He had made no sudden gestures, no declarations of change, but the internal shift had begun. He had chosen restraint, reflection, and understanding over habit and authority. And though the path ahead remained uncertain, he had glimpsed the possibility of a different way of interacting with the world. It was a small step, but in the context of a lifetime shaped by habit, it was monumental. Anahita, aware that the encounter was ending, maintained her composure. She did not celebrate, nor did she offer praise. She simply existed in her quiet strength, carrying with her the knowledge that she had influenced someone without aggression or demand. The man, meanwhile, left the room carrying an awareness that would stay with him, that even small choices, made with care and presence, could have profound impact. And that sometimes the simplest actions, pausing, listening, considering, were the most powerful of all. Days passed after the encounter, yet its memory stayed with both Anahita and the man. For her, the experience was a quiet confirmation of something she had always believed, that calm honesty and inner strength could influence the world, even if only in small ways. For him, the moment had become a mirror he could not ignore, a reflection of choices he had taken for granted and actions he had performed without thought for so many years. The man returned to his daily life with a sense of awareness he had never experienced before. He noticed the subtle ways people interacted around him, the tone of a colleague's voice, the hesitation in a neighbor's steps, the glances exchanged between friends. In the past, he had often ignored such signals, too preoccupied with asserting his authority or maintaining control. Now he found himself observing more carefully, considering more deeply, and questioning his habitual reactions. For the first time, he understood that every interaction carried weight, and that restraint, reflection, and empathy could shape outcomes in ways he had never imagined. Anahita, meanwhile, resumed her responsibilities in her community. She worked tirelessly to support her family, helping with chores, sharing knowledge with younger villagers, and maintaining her own sense of personal dignity. Though life was still difficult, she carried a subtle confidence now, a quiet reassurance that the world could respond differently if one approached it with patience and honesty. She reflected on the encounter with the man often, recognizing that her strength had not been in defiance, but in presence, the ability to hold herself steady while giving him space to choose differently. The effects of that single encounter began to ripple outward, slowly but surely. In the days that followed, people around the man noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He was less abrupt in his interactions, more willing to listen before making judgments. He hesitated before imposing decisions, thinking first about their potential impact on others.
Colleagues who had once approached him with trepidation began to feel a cautious sense of respect rather than fear.
While the changes were small and gradual, they were significant. People who had grown accustomed to his rigid authority now sensed a new dimension to his personality, one shaped by awareness, reflection, and a growing capacity for empathy. Anahita heard whispers of these changes in the village. Though she did not seek recognition, she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her calm, honest approach had made a difference. She understood that human behavior was complex and rarely altered by a single moment. Yet she also knew that the smallest gestures could plant seeds that grew over time. Her own resilience, combined with the man's unexpected pause, had created an opportunity for growth and understanding, proof that even small acts of integrity could ripple beyond immediate circumstances. The man, too, reflected frequently on the encounter. He recalled Anahita's words, her posture, and the gentle firmness of her voice. Her presence had reminded him of moments from his own childhood, times when he had wished for guidance, patience, and understanding, rather than judgment or fear. He realized that his approach to life had been shaped by habit and fear, not by reflection or awareness. And now, facing this new perspective, he began to consider the possibility of choosing differently in every interaction moving forward. One morning he found himself in a situation that tested this emerging awareness. A young villager approached him, visibly nervous, seeking advice about a personal matter. In the past, he might have dismissed the question quickly, providing a brief directive without fully listening. But this time, he paused. He listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions and considering the individual's feelings. He noticed how different it felt to respond with patience and understanding, rather than authority and control. And he saw the impact immediately. The young villager's tension eased, a sense of trust began to form, and a small but meaningful connection was created. Anahita, observing from a distance, began to see the longer-term effects of the encounter in her own community. People who had felt wary around the man now interacted with him more freely, and relationships that had been strained slowly began to heal. The village atmosphere, once tinged with tension, became more collaborative. Conversations were calmer, decisions were more thoughtful, and people felt a growing sense of mutual respect. It was not a dramatic transformation, but a subtle shift that revealed the power of patience, empathy, and mindful action. As weeks turned into months, the man's internal changes became more apparent in his daily life. He reflected on how easily he had allowed fear, habit, and expectation to guide his decisions in the past. Now he noticed the difference that intentional awareness could make, not only for himself, but for others as well. He discovered a sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with authority or control. It came from seeing positive outcomes, from recognizing the humanity in others, and from understanding that restraint could foster trust, respect, and connection. Anahita's role in this transformation remained subtle but significant. She did not seek recognition, nor did she attempt to influence outcomes directly. She simply lived her life with honesty, calmness, and resilience. Her actions demonstrated a quiet form of leadership, the kind that inspires by example rather than by demand. She understood that her influence was not always immediate or visible, but that consistent, thoughtful behavior could create change in unexpected ways. The man, reflecting on his life, began to consider the broader implications of his choices. He understood that authority was not inherently negative, but that its exercise carried responsibility. He recognized that the way he interacted with others could shape their experiences, influence their confidence, and either encourage or suppress their potential. And he realized that the moment with Anahita had provided a turning point, a chance to practice intentional leadership, guided by empathy and reflection rather than fear and habit. One afternoon he sought out Anahita to express gratitude, not with grand gestures or declarations, but with simple acknowledgement. He spoke carefully, recognizing the impact of her presence and her courage. "Your words made me think differently," he said. "I have started to see things in ways I had never considered before. Thank you for your patience and honesty." Anahita received his words with quiet humility. She did not offer praise or reassurance. She simply acknowledged the truth of the moment, reinforcing the lesson that change is often subtle, gradual, and deeply personal. In the months that followed, both Anahita and the man continued their respective paths, each influenced by that pivotal encounter. Anahita remained a source of quiet strength within her community, providing guidance and support without seeking attention. The man carried the awareness he had gained into every interaction, slowly redefining his relationships, his decisions and his understanding of leadership. Their lives intersected in a single moment, but its impact rippled far beyond, demonstrating the profound effects of patience, empathy, and deliberate choice. The community around them began to notice changes as well. People reported feeling safer, more respected, and more willing to contribute ideas and support one another. The atmosphere of fear and caution gradually gave way to collaboration and understanding. It was not a dramatic transformation, but it was real, a testament to the quiet power of human presence, reflection, and thoughtful action. The ripple effect of one moment, when approached with honesty and courage, had extended into the lives of many, subtly reshaping interactions, decisions, and relationships. Anahita often reflected on the encounter, recognizing that her courage had been quiet but effective. She had not acted out of defiance or anger. She had simply spoken her truth and allowed the man to make a choice. And that choice, influenced by her presence, had begun to create meaningful change. She understood that human behavior is complex and unpredictable, but she also recognized that one person's calm, honest actions could inspire reflection and growth in others. The man, too, carried the lesson forward in his own life. He had discovered that true strength was not about control, power, or fear. It was about awareness, patience, and empathy. He realized that even small, deliberate actions could influence outcomes in profound ways, creating trust, respect, and understanding. And he understood that the encounter with Anahita had provided a powerful example of how courage, calmness, and honesty could inspire change even in someone hardened by habit and expectation. Over time, both Anahita and the man came to see the encounter not as a singular event, but as the beginning of a larger journey, a journey of awareness, reflection, and mutual growth. The experience reinforced the idea that human interactions carry weight, that choices have consequences, and that the quiet courage of one individual can influence the actions of another. It was a lesson in patience, empathy, and the subtle, lasting power of mindful presence. Time moved forward in quiet but steady rhythms. Life in the village continued, with its daily routines, challenges, and celebrations. For Anahita, every day was a mix of responsibility, reflection, and small victories. She rose early to tend to her family and the household chores, cared for her younger siblings, and helped neighbors when they needed support. Her life was never easy, but she carried a subtle, unshakable confidence that came from knowing she had faced challenges before and had survived. Her encounter with the man had left a mark not just on him but on her own understanding of herself.
She realized that strength could take many forms, and that influence was not always loud or dramatic.
Sometimes it came from simply being present, being honest, and allowing others the space to make their own choices. That lesson had become part of her identity, guiding her interactions with family, neighbors, and the broader community. The man, too, had changed, though the transformation was gradual and often subtle. He approached his daily tasks and relationships with a newfound awareness. He paused before reacting, listened more attentively, and considered the perspectives of others before making decisions. The habits of a lifetime did not disappear overnight, but the intention to act thoughtfully rather than automatically began to guide him. People noticed the difference, even if they could not always articulate it. His presence became less intimidating and more approachable. Conversations, once tense and cautious, grew warmer and more cooperative. Over time, a shift began to emerge in the village itself. The ripple effect of that one encounter became visible in small but meaningful ways. Community members, inspired by the change in the man and by Anahita's quiet strength, began to engage more openly with one another. They shared ideas, offered support, and collaborated on tasks that had once been approached with suspicion or reluctance. The atmosphere, while still filled with the challenges of rural life, carried a sense of trust and mutual respect that had previously been absent. Anahita observed these changes with a mix of humility and quiet pride. She did not claim credit, nor did she expect recognition. She understood that the progress was not solely due to her words or actions, but to the combined choices of everyone involved, including the man who had begun to reflect and act differently. Her role had been small yet significant, like a single thread woven into a larger tapestry that was slowly revealing its patterns. The man himself recognized the profound impact of that initial encounter. He thought often about Anahita's courage, her calm presence, and her honesty. He realized that her influence had been powerful not because she had demanded change, but because she had held herself with dignity and allowed him to make his own choices. That insight reshaped the way he viewed leadership, authority, and human connection. He understood that true influence came from guiding rather than commanding, from listening rather than asserting, and from demonstrating integrity through action rather than words alone. One day a situation arose that tested both of them in new ways. A neighboring village faced a difficult problem. Food shortages caused by unexpected weather changes had left many families struggling. Leaders from both villages met to discuss possible solutions. Anahita participated actively, offering practical suggestions based on her experience, her careful observations, and her understanding of the community's needs. The man, present in his capacity as a local authority figure, listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and worked collaboratively rather than dictating solutions. The outcome of the meeting was encouraging. Plans were made to share resources, coordinate efforts, and ensure that every family received the support they needed. The process was not perfect, and challenges remained, but the collaborative approach created a sense of unity that had been missing in the past. Anahita noticed how much more responsive the man had become to feedback, how willing he was to acknowledge others' contributions, and how he carried himself with a quiet confidence that inspired cooperation rather than fear. Through experiences like this, the man and Anahita continued to grow, both individually and together. They were not friends in the conventional sense, nor did they need to be. Their relationship was defined by mutual respect, understanding, and shared commitment to the well-being of their community. Each encounter, each decision, each collaborative effort reinforced the lessons they had learned, that patience, empathy, and thoughtful action could transform interactions, relationships, and even entire communities. Anahita's family benefited from her strength and wisdom as well. Her younger siblings looked up to her not only as a caretaker but also as a model of resilience, honesty, and courage. She taught them, not through lectures, but through her actions, the importance of integrity, the value of thoughtful decision-making, and the power of calm presence in challenging situations. Her influence shaped the next generation in ways that would ripple far beyond her immediate family, nurturing qualities of empathy, resilience, and awareness. The man's influence on the broader community also continued to grow. People began to approach him with trust rather than fear. He handled disagreements more thoughtfully, considered the perspectives of others before making decisions, and modeled the values of patience and reflection. Over time, his interactions became more genuine, his guidance more effective, and his leadership more inclusive. The lessons learned from that one encounter with Anahita had not only changed him, but also contributed to the overall harmony and collaboration within the community. Life, of course, was not without challenges. There were days of hardship, moments of uncertainty, and situations that tested patience and resilience. Yet both Anahita and the man approached these moments with the understanding that change was a process, that growth was gradual, and that even small acts of integrity and empathy could create meaningful outcomes. They learned to accept imperfections, to celebrate small victories, and to recognize the cumulative impact of consistent, thoughtful action. The village as a whole began to flourish in subtle ways. Families supported one another more openly. Communication improved, and collaboration became the norm rather than the exception. People were more willing to share resources, offer guidance, and participate in community initiatives. The environment became one of trust and mutual respect, where fear and tension no longer dominated interactions. And through it all, Anahita's quiet strength and the man's reflective approach served as guiding examples of the transformative power of patience, presence, and thoughtful action. For Anahita, the experience reinforced a lifelong understanding that courage is not always dramatic and influence is not always visible. True courage can be quiet, persistent, and grounded in integrity. True influence can manifest in subtle ways, shaping others' choices and encouraging growth without ever demanding it. She understood that every interaction mattered, and that her commitment to honesty, calmness, and resilience could create ripples that extended far beyond her immediate perception. For the man, the encounter with Anahita became a turning point in his life. He had learned that authority is most effective when tempered with empathy, that leadership is most meaningful when guided by reflection, and that human connection is built not on fear but on trust and respect. His growth was ongoing, shaped by countless moments of choice and reflection, but the foundation had been laid by that one quiet, honest interaction with a woman who refused to shrink in the face of life's challenges. As years passed, the story of that encounter became a quiet legend within the village. People spoke of it not as a tale of conflict or heroism, but as an example of the subtle, profound power of human presence, integrity, and reflection. It served as a reminder that even in challenging circumstances, one person's courage and honesty can inspire change in others, and that thoughtful action, patience, and empathy can transform relationships, communities, and lives. In the end, the lesson was clear. Survival, resilience, and meaningful influence are not always found in grand gestures or dramatic moments. They are often found in quiet courage, deliberate reflection, and the ability to act with integrity even in small, everyday. Anahita and the man had both discovered that truth, and in doing so, they left a legacy of hope, understanding, and connection that extended far beyond themselves. The village continued to thrive, shaped by the choices of individuals who had learned the power of patience, and though life remained filled with challenges and uncertainties, the story of Anahita and the man stood as a testament to the quiet, transformative potential within every human being. It reminded everyone that the simplest actions, listening, reflecting, speaking honestly, and acting with care, could create ripples that changed not only individual lives, but the fabric of an entire community.